All right. Good afternoon, everyone. So glad everybody's here with us, joining us on LinkedIn and Facebook and YouTube. We will give folks just another minute or two to come in, and then we will get started. So get those questions ready, get those comments ready, because we definitely want to have an amazing conversation with these incredible leaders who I consider really, really great friends, and all of you, some of whom are great friends, and some of whom will be friends after this conversation. So we'll get started in a minute, and we'll go from there. And if I recall correctly, when I came back in, I was hearing some conversation around light fixtures, bathroom fixtures.
Oh, appliances.
Appliances. What was that all about?
Big expenditures of having to update them, and then nothing's made like it used to be.
Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? I don't know if anybody else. So here in Richmond City, we had another small, minor water issue yesterday and last night. And right around 9 o'clock, the water started getting cloudy again. And so we were like, I don't want to deal with this again. But it seemed to have been a fairly short-lived issue with just finishing the repairs of the water main and getting water flowing and flushing things. But we did have to have DPU come out and flush the lines by the house so we could use it again. Good times.
Always good times.
Yeah. Hey, quick tech check thing. I think it's working really well with all of us not being on mute. That way it's easier to jump in and out of conversation. But is it fine? Nobody's getting any. It's working. You're good with that too, right, James? All of us staying off mute, or will there be times that?
Yeah, I think when we go into a couple of slides for folks, if you want, you can go on mute, but it's really up to you, because I also want you to chime in if you see something you want to hook on, because I don't want to wait till the end and be like, what do you think? Also, we're just going to have those slides up for a few minutes. The rest of it really is just conversation and hopefully responding to thoughts and feedback from the group. So, yeah.
Cool.
All right. Well, it is a little bit after 2, so let's go ahead and get started. And I'd love to just go around and do a quick round of introductions, have you introduce yourself. You'll see some folks start to come in through the chat who are introducing themselves. And yeah, I'll go around the horn on what I see. Jody, do you want to kick us off?
I had a feeling that was going to be.
I can't hear you, Jody.
Oh, I had a feeling that was going to be me. Are you good? Are you good?
Can you guys hear Jody? Because I can't.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. Well, then keep going, Jody.
It's going to be an interesting conversation. Jody Alexander.
We'll fix that too,
I am
but in the meantime, keep going.
Yep, I'm the president and CEO of the YMCA of Greater Richmond. So happy to be here. Kerri, I'll kick it to you.
Hi, Jody. Hi, everybody. My name is Kerri Soukup. I am in Chicago. I am the founder and creator of Sentiment Project, and began my career, which also became a 25-year career as a creative leader at Leo Burnett. And so, yeah, that's what I'm up to now, is using creativity in different ways that allows people to process and make meaning of grief and heal in community. So it's great to be here with all of you.
Awesome. Thanks, Kerri. And to our viewers and listeners, apologies if you're experiencing some of our technical, meaning my technical difficulties. We're not really sure what's going on with Restream today, but at least my teammates can hear Jody if I can't, and we'll make it work from there. What a funny time to be alive with tech. Jason, do you want to go next?
Yeah, happy to. Hey, everybody. Jason Ashlock here, co-founder of the Tomorrow Company, coming to you from Eastern Henrico, a last stretch of historic farmland here on the east side of the county outside Richmond, Virginia. Here we have about 40 acres where we invite people to come and experience the wisdom of nature as a way to inform our practices of building organizations and communities. Looking to the wisdom of nature to solve some of our most proximate and biggest challenges of our time. And then we also bring that wisdom inside organizations to think about what belonging and productivity and value creation looks like through a different lens. Happy to be here today.
Awesome. Yeah, some fun folks coming into the chat. I see, let's see. I see Owen. Hey, Owen. I see Casey. I think Casey's in Asheville. It's great to hear from you and see you, Casey. Meg Lindholm's here. She is a consultant, producer, podcast producer. Chris Hairston White is joining. It's good to see you, Chris. Let's see. Is that Janina? How do you pronounce her name? Janina from the Y. Great to see you. Erin is here. That's awesome. April is here. And yeah, this is great. We're off to a fun start with a really, really great group. So thank you all so much for joining us in today's conversation. And we're exploring something really interesting and something we talk about a lot. Sometimes something we don't really think and work that hard towards or create the intention that we need, which is around belonging. And I think we're also going to talk about it in ways that maybe surprise some of you, that we're not just looking at this through what many of us assume is the predominant lens, maybe even the only lens. We think about belonging inside organizations. We think about belonging inside of communities, but we don't often think about it in other spaces, maybe civic engagement spaces, maybe the brands that some of us work on in the marketplace, or really just belonging for ourselves as we're moving through life and navigating things. So we're going to talk about all of that, and you're going to hear about it from the experiences and perspectives of these leaders that you see on your screen. And I'm really curious to know, maybe even before we jump in, when I invited you to chime in and share your perspectives and experiences about belonging, I'm curious what you thought about that, and I'm curious what made you say yes. And I'm going to go in reverse this time. I'm going to start with Jason, and then you can hand it off to Kerri, and then Kerri, you can hand it off to Jody. And if I still can't hear Jody, someone's going to have to tell me what Jody said, because I'm sure it's going to be amazing. All right, Jason, what made you say yes, and what sort of stoked your interest in this topic?
You know, I think it starts very personally that, James, you as an individual create a kind of sphere of belonging around you. And so you practice this behavior of invitation and accessibility and inclusiveness that I think makes it easy to say yes when you invite us to do something. A bit more broadly and more professionally, I think there's a way of thinking about my entire professional life as being in the space of belonging. I don't often talk about it that way, but I think it's not a false shift of perspective to see it that way. I've been a lot of things in my life, but above all, I've been a student of story. How do stories unify us? Grad work in literature and religion. How do stories give us a sense of a shared North Star or center of gravity or some kind of coherence and cohesion as diverse and disparate groups of people? And how do the stories we tell ourselves help us live into who we want to be, and over time evolve a sense of self and a sense of togetherness? So I don't think you can pull narrative art too far away from belonging, because story is a sense-making tool, and that sense-making tool is almost always done socially. It's almost always done by means of our proximity to each other, shared set of values, shared set of behaviors, how we are together here now doing something to move forward. Our agency is gained almost always in the presence of others. So I think there's a community vibration inside the idea of story and narrative. And so when you talk belonging, it starts speaking to a kind of core practice and a love of mine, which is story.
That's awesome. Thank you, Jason. Kerri, what intrigued you about this topic, and when you think about belonging and some of the work you do, what's coming to mind for you?
Yeah, well, when you first asked me, I think so much of what you just shared, Jason, was really lovely and just very relatable when it comes to spaces with James involved in general. So that really spoke to me. And I think what I first started thinking about is just the contrast in the spaces I've been in from what I'm creating now with Sentiment Project and smaller, more intimate, community based spaces, from large, huge organizations with really big teams, but yet the parallels that have emerged and so clearly exist that maybe I wasn't even like conscious of or expecting, in the beginning. So I think that reflecting on those parallels, no matter whether it is one-on-one with one individual or an organization of 2,000 people and teams of 50 plus. So I think that resonates very deeply, and I think just the way that my personal journey with belonging has kind of been so integral to my growth as a leader, and just the journey that I've been on, from the beginning, starting out in advertising in, 1999 to where we are now, and just the way that things have changed, and the way that belonging is even looked at or valued or not valued over those points in time. And yeah, my journey with feeling more belonging, how that has helped me grow as an empathetic leader to this point. So yeah, just so many connections and reasons that I think it's important to talk about. So thank you for opening the discussion.
Thank you. And Jody, I'm going to try to listen to you speak from my other device because it's really important to me to hear what you have to say, but go for it.
I was going to say all of these amazing things about you, James, and you're not going to be able to hear them. So
This is really why James hosts these events, right? Yeah.
We can put them in the chat. Well, first of all, the connection to James through the work that he does with the YMCA, there's no way to say no to being a part of this. For one of the first times in my career, which spans about 37 years and a bunch of different states, I've been in this total pursuit of why do people want to come to our organization? What makes people stay with our organization, not only as a member or participant, or why do they leave? As well as what does that look like for our staff? And I think I've had this framing forever of how do those things work together? And as kind of a side personal note, my kids and I, and it's probably from growing up in the Y, we've always talked about this, like, what we do as a family mantra is we bring people together. And why do we bring people together? Because we want people to feel good. We want them to make, connections. And so there's just always been this, like, why behaviorally do people, come to our organization? So James and I got into this super deep, unintended conversation at one point in time where he actually was able to take my rambling of sorts and say, oh my gosh, I know what you mean. I know what you mean on how we don't want people to just feel satisfied with something or experience something. We want them to have a human emotion of joy and happiness. And when they feel that, how might that affect the communities that they are a part of? So we just got into this kind of crazy conversation, and it's evolved for the last couple of years of how do we create that? How do we do that? And so to say yes to this, to be with the two of you and James in this conversation and exploration was, actually a super easy thing to say yes to. I hope you heard that.
This is so wild to like watch from the facial expressions of Kerri and Jason doing just like, I need you all to be like much more exaggerated in the head. I can't pick up anything Jody's saying. I did check to make sure the audio is coming through fine on my other devices. It's just something's going on with the tech today, but as long as all of you out there can hear what Jody has to say, that's the most important thing. I will also say, I appreciate very much some of the thoughts and perspectives on helping bring us together. In truth, I'm lucky because I just get to do this as part of a team. And yes, this stuff matters very, very deeply to me, but it matters a lot to us at Share More Stories. It matters a lot to the team of people that do this great work all day, every day. So I would be remiss if I didn't say that, because yes, I care deeply about this, but I'm one of a number of people that I get to work with who do. So what what I thought I would do real quick is just pull up a couple of slides around belonging that may provoke and stimulate some additional thoughts from you all, from Jason and Kerri and Jody, but also from people tuning in and watching in the chat. And so, if there's questions that jump up, please, chime in. And especially Jason and Kerri, because I can hear you, interrupt me. Or if Jody has something to say, interrupt me, and I will just wait patiently until you cue me that Jody's done talking. Let me share screen real quick and talk a little bit about these things. Hold, please.
And James, as you're pulling that up, we will do that. And also Jody was saying that when you asked, it was something that there's no way she could say no to, and just talking about all of the wonderful counsel and the ways that you make her feel heard. So just conveying that to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Kerri.
All right, let's get to this. So you get to see our faces again, as if you didn't know who we were or need to see us. But again, just really, really honored and grateful for this awesome group of people that I get to talk about this with today. One of the things that I'm going to invite all of us to do here in the moment, in the real time, is think about a time when you felt that you belonged. You can reference that in the chat, to my fellow guests today. Be thinking about that because we might come back to it. But especially for leaders, I have found that this is one of the most important things we can do. And also one of the things leaders struggle to do is to connect our own experience as leaders of organizations, of communities, of brands, anywhere. We struggle to connect our own lived experience to the experiences of the people that we're leading. And sometimes that creates a disconnect. And so I'm going to invite all of you watching, participating, start thinking about this, right? The next thing I wanted to sort of make the point is that one of the reasons why we think belonging is really, really important, matters, is because it drives connection. It enables connection. And I think we can all agree, if you look at the world around you, we are in need of much more connection. We are fraying at the edges. We're losing our sense of connection to each other in any of the different ways we show up in human life. And we believe at Share More Stories, it really starts with authentic leaders who are willing to show up with courage, with curiosity, and with vulnerability, because that's what closes the gap between their lived experience and the experiences of the people that they are leading. It's not just our opinion that connection matters, that belonging matters. Many of you are aware that there was a Surgeon General's report back in 2023 that really looked at the epidemic of loneliness and isolation. I would argue that report's due for a refresh because it has gotten more and more challenging, especially for people at the sort of the spectrum, the sort of endpoints of our spectrum, people who are living maybe alone as older adults, and people who are young people. The isolation and loneliness those two groups of our communities and population feel seem to be significant, right? But these aren't just things that we think are important for culture and to get the people, right? People to like you and to say yes to the company, or to move to your community, or to buy your product or brand. These are fundamental human needs, and they influence that mental well-being we were just talking about, as well as our overall health. And I think Jody can speak to that, and any of her colleagues from the YMCA, both here in Richmond and around the country, know that really, really, truly. It's also a business imperative. It is important because it's a human need, and it matters for our human experience. It also matters in whatever the business is that you do, whether that is in a nonprofit, whether that's in a for-profit, whether that's in public sector. These are things that most of us should want, right? Better experiences for our employees, better experience for our customers and stakeholders, our participants, our members, our residents, better decision-making. And we talk about this a lot at Share More Stories, is what we're really trying to do here is help people make better decisions about these experiences so that the experiences are better and they're more impactful. And the relationships piece, of course, it matters a lot. So these are things that I think, you can fill in the blank, put business on Velcro and use whatever word you want, but belonging is an imperative, especially in how we work, but also in how we move through society, as residents, as consumers, as people who show up in community. In our opinion, the challenge of creating more belonging, if you will, or building belonging the way these leaders have, it's not so much about more data. It's about better decision making. It's about getting clearer about what's actually happening. And I think a lot of us as leaders, we all had like one or two of these experiences, right? There's times when we're looking at the data, and even if the data looks pretty good, we're like, something ain't right. I can feel it in my gut. Something's still missing. And that's because as a leader, you have experiences, you have expertise. And so, there's a gap between what you see in the data, but what you in your leader's mindset kind of know or believe or feel to be true. The other is you're navigating the data, you're navigating what's going on in your organization or your community or your brand, the employee engagement scores, they don't look great, or the customer satisfaction doesn't look great, and you can't figure out why. And we tend to think those are two of the big challenges facing leaders today, especially in a space like belonging, which feels and sounds to some of you maybe quote unquote touchy-feely. It doesn't to me, because this is how I'm wired. But I understand that not everybody sees it the same, and they want to put measures around it. They want to quantify it. They want to measure it so that they can do something about it. And I get that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We've all been in those positions. And so that's what we try to do in the SEEQ platform. Many of you already know who we are and what we do, so I won't overwhelm you with this. There will be links for you to not just learn more about what we do, but learn about what each of these organizations are doing. And which reminds me, I sent a newsletter out today highlighting the work that each of these leaders is doing. So check that out. It's on the Share More Stories LinkedIn page. Get an understanding of how Jody and her team are building achievement, relationships, and belonging as outcomes at the YMCA. Get an understanding of how Jason and his co-founder, Becky, are building an incredible experience for leadership reflection and development, organizational development, building stronger teams, and go deep into how Kerri is creating spaces where people can create, share, and heal across all different kinds of journeys. So I definitely want you all to check those out. I'll make sure we drop that link in the chat, or if anybody wants to go while we're doing it, it's on the Share More Stories page on LinkedIn. If you go to our newsletter, the most recent newsletter has all of the stuff that they're doing, and I want you guys to take a look at it. The way we navigate this, and I heard Jason say at the beginning, can't separate this from the narrative process and the narrative world. I couldn't agree more. And one of the things we've been passionate about, Andy's not on today's call. Andy Citizen is our Chief Technology Officer. Together, we have brought over the years, before our team expanded, we brought this deep desire to understand stories and this deep desire to understand and analyze data, and we brought those together. And so you can see it on the screen. You'll get these slides later, but there's a process. There's a method to I won't say our madness, there's a method to our brilliance in how we are taking the stories of people, their real lived experiences, and turning those into intelligence. The focus of today's conversation and this work we did called the State of Belonging is in fact just that, right? The experience of feeling seen, accepted, valued, supported, and connected. And this is the operative phrase here. In any environment where a person seeks relationship. We've heard phrases like, bring your whole self to work. Well, what if I don't want to? So it depends on where I am seeking relationship and then what I want to experience and feel in those places. Before I keep going, I want to pause real quick and just see, do my guests have any thoughts on any of that, anything they want to add to the conversation before I share a couple more slides? Nothing? Bueller?
We can't hear you, James. No, I'm kidding.
Oh my gosh. Jason, you might. I was like, oh my God.
I appreciate so much the agency embedded in that last clause at the bottom of this paragraph that allows an individual the freedom to pursue and create belonging. Recognizing that, to your point about the loneliness epidemic or any number of other social constraints that define how we live together in the world today, that the way each of us is navigating these times deserves respect for the individual prerogative. And so I think often in organizations, the intention of the organization precedes the respect for the individual. And opening up the space for that individual to become and to be what he or she or they need to be in that environment. So big thumbs up to the sense of agency. And when you seek relationship, belonging is the place where that relationship can flourish.
That's awesome.
Can I
go ahead, Jody.
help James know I got you here? Yeah. I just think about this, and I hate that sometimes we have to frame things this way, but we do have this kind of pre-COVID, post-COVID, and being such a huge youth-serving organization, the idea of being so much more intentional in belonging, of the feel, seen, heard, valued, loved, is a theme that we're seeing even stronger. And we're seeing it in both a positive way, but we can also see it in such a fractured way. Mm-hmm. And now that we're, 5 years past that, as kids continue to age and develop, it's just showing up in so many different ways. And we've just got to continue to be so strategic and intentional at the same time, because as we get into post high school and careers and launching people into adulthood, this is going to be even so much more critical for us. It's just showing up in so many ways, or not showing up in the ways that it needs to.
Yeah. And I would just add to what you're both saying. I think for me, as I was reflecting on coming into this space and this conversation and just belonging in general, I feel like the heard and seen are the more obvious things that a lot of leaders and organizations, think about right away, and people in general when we think of belonging. But I, was thinking, as I was thinking about this a lot, I would just couldn't stop thinking about valued. And when I compared this to, or put it in context of my own personal journey, and how much, whether I felt valued at certain points in time, or, what you felt, valued around, just how critical that is. And it's kind of cool in the comments here. I just want to shine a light on some of the people making comments around that as well, around just the importance of the acknowledgement of the value I bring, and how it doesn't have to be explicit. It can be in the way I'm asked to contribute, or how many of my inputs are considered and actually, made actionable. So multiple people talking about the valued piece. And I just, from my own personal experience, that piece of it is so critical and such a important part of this whole equation here.
Well, and I think, that's a large part of what we found too. When we did this study, we explored over 4,000 stories and expressions. Expressions are sort of moments within the stories, and each of those produces a lot of emotional data, over 160,000 scores of different attitudes, needs, and values. And we want to keep building this, right? Because we think this is so important for leaders to have access to this kind of insight. The thing that jumped out at us, which is now no longer really the headline, but at the time was wait, we can measure belonging. We can talk about, well, what does it look like and feel like, and what are the conditions that create that emotional experience you just described, Kerri, where I do feel valued, I do feel seen. And of course, it's going to vary somewhat within different contexts, but we did find some really interesting things overall that sort of jumped out at us. We found that, sympathy, or you might almost think about that as empathy, right? We score things on a 5-point scale from 0 to 4. So 4 is actually the highest. So if you see a 3.9, that's really high. That means across all of these stories in different contexts, this is a really, really important piece in people's experience of belonging, right? Mutual care and recognition. We see altruism, right? Support and generosity towards one another. We see openness, emotional safety, and authenticity. What would it look like? I mean, again, I think people can conceive of some of these in an organization, and some of you may be saying, no, I worked in an organization where we had none of these. But push yourself also. Think about, what does this look like in a community from a resident standpoint? What does this look like from a civic engagement standpoint? Some of the things that we also found interesting are emotions or attitudes that you don't have to have at a high level or presence in order for there to be belonging. It doesn't have to be the most excited social environment, which we tend to think of as greater experiences and more engaging experiences. Doesn't mean those things don't matter. It just means they're not driving this definition of belonging in the study that we did. We also explored when belonging is absent. So looking at the stories and the experiences, we found places where the opposite of that feeling of belonging was there. These were places where we call them low belonging, belonging poor, or belonging absent. And you see some really key indicators here, right? Emotionality without stability. What do we mean by that? Well, just think about it. If you're in a situation and things don't feel safe, psychologically safe, you don't feel clear on where you are and where you're going, what you're doing. I don't know about you, but sometimes people tend to react in those situations because they're looking to create their own stability, their own clarity. And that may show up as I'm not regulating my own emotions, or I'm feeling unpredictable, or the environment is unpredictable. Cautiousness is very high in places where belonging isn't very prevalent. And that means, think about that in the organization or in the marketplace or in your community. We're all trying to build better communities for people. And we need them to sort of embrace innovation, embrace openness, embrace a willingness to try things, curiosity. But if they're really, really cautious because they're afraid of being judged or excluded when they try something or offer something, what does that mean, right? And so those are just a couple of places where we see belonging really measured and measurable. We see it show up in all of these spaces that we've been talking about. Personal well-being, which we don't talk a lot about in these conversations, but it really matters. Employee experience, customer experience, and community, and then of course, civic engagement. And then the last two things I'll show before I bring the slides back down, because I really want to hear from our guests. You may not be able to read all this right now on the screen, but again, you'll get the slides. You can take a screen grab. One of the things we do with the SEEQ platform is we start to look at different segments of experiences from an emotional perspective. So we're all familiar with demographic segmentation, of course, and much more common nowadays, behavior-based segmentation. We like to look at emotional based segmentation. So how are people feeling about those experiences? How does those experiences make them feel? Why are they feeling that way? And then if you were to focus on those things first, how might that give you a different view of your organization, your audience, your community? So think about it this way. I might look at two people who have the same characteristics behavioral and be like, they want the same things, but turns out their motivations or their drivers are different. They don't really want the same things. They may be using or doing the same things. And likewise, there may be people in your organization or in your community or your market that you like, there's no way they want the same things, because look at them, they're very different and they behave differently. But then you find, hey, two of them, they really share some of these different emotional needs. And so that just gives you a different way to think about how to deliver belonging through employee experience, through customer experience, through community experience, by looking at people based on how they're navigating their experiences emotionally, based on how they feel, based on not just what's happening, but why it matters to them. What does it feel like? Well, it feels like on one end of the spectrum being seen. It doesn't mean you have to say yes to all of these as an individual, but it might feel like being seen versus being invisible. It might feel like being connected versus disconnected. It might feel like you can show up and be authentic versus not feeling heard, right? And so those are a couple of things we just wanted to show in the moment and give you some things to think about and react to. I'm going to bring the slides back down and get back to conversation. But I'm just curious, when people see those things either in the chat or in our group, what's resonating for you is what I'd love to know a little bit more about. I can get these slides down. Go ahead, chime in.
There's the work of Antonio Damasio that comes to mind, the groundbreaking psychologist who studied the role of emotional signaling in decision making. And his statement was that we're not thinking machines that feel, we're feeling machines that think. Now, we're not machines at all. Obviously, we're animals, but I'll forgive him the bad metaphor. The point of our having emotional processing lead our interface with an individual, a team, a leader, and an organization, and embracing that fact rather than trying to avoid it. And James, you and I have talked about this in other contexts, but so much of the work of trying to incorporate emotions into the work of doing business or being a business or doing nonprofit work, Jody, or whatever, has turned into things like journey maps and customer personas and things like this, which is really just another way of trying to kind of mechanize the journey, of trying to build it into its own kind of engineering model. When emotions are messier than that, our ability to absorb them and to create places for that emotional experience is more difficult than what we want it to be. And what I like about the belonging study and why I hooked into it so easily, and why, James, you and I have discussed it at length in other contexts, is because it begins to give us a different vocabulary and a different model by which to understand and identify the emotional realities that are present in the relationships that we're trying to foster. And that is so widely applicable and challenges so much of the status quo around how we begin to formulate and think about B2B or B2C relationships or nonprofit client, nonprofit community relationships. It really challenges that in a really fundamental way, which I think is really rich and vital and has a lot of promise for a bunch of different contexts, some of which are reflected on the call today.
Yeah. Jody, what's your take on some of this? And, as you think about what you're leading today at the Y in this community, but also your whole experience, your career doing this in other places. The thing that I love about the Y is this idea that the outcome is what do you call it? Achievement, relationship, belong, ARB. ARB. When you think about those things, and it's so in line with this work, what have you seen, or what's been maybe even challenging about building belonging, especially in the kind of work you're doing now, where you're really helping to transform this organization? And I'm really going to count on my teammates here to give some really good recap points so I can hook onto it. But don't worry about me. Share this brilliance with everybody else, please.
There's just so many directions to go with that. So maybe I'll just super quick start with my own career and journey through the Y. So I've been here in Richmond 3 years, first-time CEO, and there's a very, very small percentage of women that are, in being a CEO. So it comes with all of even in our organization, it still comes with all of the stereotypes of emotional regulation and that is not me. I am expressive and I am very vulnerable, and just thinking about all of the things to be able to lead an organization and trying really hard in knowing how I want to create a sense of belonging, not getting into the leadership traps of I need to know all the things. I need to be all things to all people. I have to make all of the decisions. So I think about how hard it was to move through the career, but along the way, stay completely grounded in the culture and the environment that I want to create. And I miss it all of the time. I mess it up all of the time, but our organization tends to be very hierarchical. And that's something that we've tried really hard to disrupt, is where can we flatten the organization? I don't mean necessarily structurally, but where we can get voice into every space that we have and use people's perspective and voice so that we're not making top-down decisions all of the time. So I really think about that from the leadership side. And then on the community side, we are in a space of creating social context. That is the entire thing, is we do bring people together. We physically bring people together in, environments and buildings, and being able to think about how intentionally we create the small communities, because it's actually, as we've grown as an organization and we have big properties and big buildings, sometimes we can have the opposite of what we're trying to do. Is, people come in and they're just lost and they don't know what to do, and they walk right back out the door, versus experiencing and finding the community. So everything that we do, trying to break down into those smaller spaces and being intentional about helping people find their peeps all the time. That's what we're trying to do. People might know us for the programs, but the outcome that we're trying to do is to help people find their space and find other people to connect to.
Kerri or Jason, do you want to hook on to some of what Jody was just saying there, and maybe not only reflect on that, but also when you think about what you've been actively building, and the challenges or successes that you've had, is there anything that you've heard Jody say that you can like, yep, I can relate to that, or how would you sort of spin it into your own lived experience? Curious to hear how you all think about that.
Well, I can just say that, Jody, is where you started when you were talking about where you are now with your journey as a female leader and first-time CEO. And so much of that was very, very relatable. And thank you for sharing all of that. In fact, so when I started, right out of college and as a art director in the advertising industry, it wasn't very common that there were very many female leaders around. But I just so happened to start at a company that had a female CEO and chief creative officer, like running the company when I started. And so part of what I've been reflecting on coming into this conversation as well, and the question that James put up at the beginning, on a time that I felt like I belonged. Sometimes I think it's the, invisible pieces or the unconscious pieces. It's like the immense privilege of like not even having to feel like you didn't belong because of the things that were in place that made you feel like you did belong. And I didn't even know, I'm right out of college. I didn't even know this wasn't how, you do, but you don't, because it's just what you are experiencing. So, it didn't stay that way. And I've had many great male leaders as well, but that definitely created an environment where, and, most of my clients at that time that I was working with and clients at the top were women as well. So I just, you are making me really reflect on that, and that, aspect of it that I can look back now and realize what a privilege that was to.
Can I ask you a question about that real quick?
Yeah.
When you think about your journey and seeing, like you said, the subconscious or unconscious elements that created that belonging for you, I'm really curious, how did that impact the way you led work on the brands? How did that show up in your sort of either innate or developed sense of these things are important and I want other people to feel them, even if they're interacting with a product or a brand that I'm helping to develop or bring into the market or bring to life from a creative standpoint? Was there a connection between those two? And if so, what was it?
Yeah, I don't know if it was conscious at the time. Looking back, I can see what you're asking, how I can see that connection, how it might have manifested, over time, maybe more unconsciously than consciously. And then later sort of like having more understanding to then have like language to apply to it, or, more consciousness to even like apply to that. Yeah, that's an interesting question, but I don't know if it was conscious at the time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So just, I think that example that you were sharing, Jody, around that. And I think just also to not lose yourself. And like, I also resonated deeply with the not losing yourself and your authenticity in that, and, conforming to certain ways to lead that might be, expected, or, just ways we can lose ourselves in leadership because of the way it is around us. So, another important thing that I think, when you can feel belonging, that you then can stay steadfast in that conviction and not conform.
Interesting. Jason, you want to chime in?
I'm just thinking about the challenges to creating belonging seems so significant when we're locked into sort of such a technologized, mechanized, atomized existence where the sort of the default mode is separation and independence and even isolation. And we feel this very much as consumers. We feel like we're one of a number when we try to engage with the company. You know, I had a new refrigerator delivered. Do I feel like Lowe's cares about me as a person? Probably not, right? I was one of the 20 deliveries today. It's a pretty common experience. I think we feel it when we work in an organization, that the more bureaucratic and large the organization, the more we feel that we're just an interchangeable part. I think we feel it sadly in relationships, even with our local government or our state government or our federal government. We're like, does my vote matter? Does my voice matter? Am I seen here? So really, whatever scale you go to, there's this sense of, I think it's very rare for people to have a legitimate feeling of belonging. And it feels very difficult within our current context to know how to build it. And what we talk a lot about here at the Tomorrow Company and at the ranch is that belonging doesn't really need to appear that complicated or sophisticated. I mean, if you think about, you walk on our 40 acres, the land is not asking you to prove yourself before you have space here. The trees not interested in you being finished or certain. The Mustangs, the horses, most certainly don't care about your title or your metrics or your dashboard for you to begin to build relationship with them. That the belonging is sort of built into the system. What nature tells us is that belonging is built through radical embrace of diversity, reciprocity, exchange, participation, interdependence, mutual thriving. There's not a single species or organism outside my window in that forest that is surviving on its own. That we often even borrow our human kind of competitive models and we apply it to nature, and we want to think that everything in nature is red and tooth and claw and competitive, but really it's much more collaborative than the human species is. That natural landscapes teach us what belonging's like. And I think that's why the field of environmental neuroscience over the past couple of decades has just exploded in the wealth of knowledge that we now have around what happens to humans when they are in natural landscapes. Pro-social behavior increases, creativity increases, rigidity decreases, problem solving increases. Why is this happening? In large part, the prevailing thinking is it's because you're in a landscape where you became human in the first place. You emerged out of this place. And so I just want to make an argument that as we think about building the infrastructure of belonging, which is really what it is, in human models, belonging requires a kind of infrastructural design, right? We can't rely on people's good instincts because the systems sometimes bracket off those good instincts because of the perverse incentives built into a lot of our society today. We have to have infrastructure, and nature gives us that infrastructure. And so I want to make a case for thinking about the human infrastructural belonging that we're building as looking to nature as a source for that kind of modeling and that kind of thinking. And if you don't believe me and you think this is too far afield, that I just invite you to take a walk in the woods for 30 minutes and tell me if you feel any different. You probably do. And that's because that forest welcomed you in a way that human models often don't.
I love what all of you are saying. And, one of the things that's interesting in real time kind of thought experiment is when I look at you all on the screen and I think about so much of what I know about what you do and why you do it and how you do it and where you do it. I'm not trying to reduce these things. I'm just seeing if there's an interesting intersection here because, I think about Jody, you and your work and the team's work at the Y. And I think so much about that is, we talk about thriving. I heard Jason talk about that. We talk about that being the why, so the WHY as well as the why, so that people might thrive in all these different ways. And I think about that as a why in this context. I think about creativity, which Kerri, and I have my own personal experiences with this. I allude to it in the newsletter, and Kerri may have mentioned it in our pre-show. I knew Kerri. I don't think we worked on the same brands, during my time at Altria and her time at Lee Burnett, we became acquainted. And, when my sister passed away, my sister Maya passed away, Kerri reached out, and she reached out because she'd had her own personal journey and experiences navigating suicide loss and being a survivor. And so she reached out to that and was like, there's a small group that we meet, and you're going to do something different. If you're up for it, you're going to create something that will help you connect and heal. It could be any number of things that you could make. And so the point is not so much about that experience, but about that process of creativity. And then I think about what Jason is talking about for us, which is very much about sort of where we do it and how we do it, that we do it through this connection to something much bigger than ourselves. It didn't show up, but it's in there. But I think self-transcendence, this feeling that we're part of something bigger, the desire to be part of something bigger, that shows up a lot in belonging, rich experiences too. I think it's a precursor, but also it's an outcome of it. I feel more connected, therefore I'm part of something bigger. And to your point, nature shows us that in real time all the time. So I love this potential thread of thriving and creativity in nature as our own recipe for what it might be like to design more intention into belonging, practically, tangibly, emotionally, experientially. What might people on this live stream today, what might you take away from this idea of thriving experiences? We don't have to compete for that. Like, let as many people thrive as possible. It's not a funnel, right? It's upside down. It's a spigot. Turn on thriving in your environment. Turn on creativity. If you have to, drag them kicking and screaming into nature, especially with the kids. Take them off the devices and put them outside. But I can attest to that too, because before the ranch opened up, Jason and Becky were kind enough to invite people to just come be there and just experience it for a moment, kind of in the wild. I don't know if somebody's got a little bit of background going on, but I'm hearing a little bit of repeat. Repeat the background noise. You guys all go on mute. Background noise all of a sudden. Somebody was in a really cool space. It's like hopping over there. But anyway, I remember he invited a number of people out. And when we went there, it might be you, Kerri, because when you just went off mute, it came back. There you go. When we went to that place, it was raw. Things were still being developed. Paths were still being cut. The venues were still being built. And all I remember was they said, just stand here for a minute and tell us what you hear and what you sense. And we're really big into sensory in the work we do at SEEQ. And all I could remember, I've got like an ear thing, which is not your problem, but the long and short of it is it drives me nuts. It bugs me a lot. Tinnitus, tomato, I'm not sure which one it is. I have that. And I swear within a few minutes of standing there, the frequencies matched, like the natural environment frequency matched that in a good way, and it made it dissipate, made it sort of fade into the background. And I could like hear and see and perceive what else was going on. I'm not saying we all have to have that kind of grandiose of an experience. I'm saying sometimes the natural world surprises the hell out of us, and we're like, because then I was able to like pay attention to what was happening in a whole different way. I mean, I go through life with this as a bit of a compromise, like missing things, not always hearing everything. And I, for that moment, was like changed. And so I just want to encourage us, not scripted, not what we were planning, but think about what is at the intersection of thriving, creativity, and nature for you, for your teams, for your families, for your communities, for your work. Explore that, and tell us, today, tomorrow, reach out, tell us what you're thinking in that space. I know we have a few minutes left, and I want to give our guests time to share a couple thoughts before we jump off. Saw a little interesting, we'll come back to that question in the chat before we jump, but real quick, 60 seconds-ish, round the horn. what are you taking away from this conversation? Maybe what have you heard from one of the other guests or in the chat that's got you really curious that you're going to spend some time thinking about after you leave today's gathering? You just come off mute to say what you got to say.
I'm thinking that everyone needs to either spend time at the ranch or at a YMCA camp is what, I'm thinking, and we'll bring some sort of creativity thread to that, because I really, when you think about being just grounded in a part of something, again, all of it starts with who you are and who you want to be and how it is that you want to create and make that space for people. So there's so many, I'm thinking about the big ways and the small ways, because that's what I heard out of today. I heard small moments and also the big organizational weight that some of us might feel, right, as we create some of these things. And it's as simple as being in a small table group of something, or if you're out and just being so present that you notice if someone doesn't feel included. There is an invisibility even in small groups. So how is it that, I'm constantly aware of myself and my own actions for that, just, creating that feeling constantly.
Yeah, I think the mindfulness that you're talking about is so important. Just caring, just paying attention. All of us in some way, I think today, have talked about how, like, really the idea is simple. The doing of it isn't what always happens, right? And so kind of back to that word, like being valued, I think just more and more people valuing the importance of it and doing it, and just the very, very seemingly simple things that we can do. I think belonging gets kind of misunderstood, and it doesn't mean that you're going to do every single thing that every person says, that every person is even going to talk every single time. There's such nuance and craft even to the way that we can help people feel seen and valued in different instances. Like, I was just on a different call this morning with a leader that we don't see each other very often anymore, but we were both kind of talking about, like, walking the floor and, like, how that was just something we just did. Like, it was just inherent to us and, like, obvious that we would just do that. And then both talking about, like, leaving places and the number of, like, notes and messages and phone calls, like, that we got around, people feeling seen, and what it meant that, like, I would literally just take a different route to the bathroom each time that I got up to go to the bathroom, so I could, like, say hi to somebody else or check in with somebody else. And so I just think, like, not minimizing the little things that we can each do to help create that feeling, whether it's with one person or with thousands.
Jason?
James, can I hook?
Jody's going to add something.
Thanks for your assistance there, Kerri. If I could just hook on really quickly. I was at one of our YMCAs at a board meeting last week, and we had a young adult, he's mid-20s now, who grew up in a club program. And he was sharing his story. He's actually the director of a theater group, and he was having his closing of his play that he had put the screen right to get to all of the things. And he was sharing with the board that back when he was 12, 13, all the way through his high school years, being a part of that club, and these are exactly the words that he said, Kerri, this is what made me think about it, is he felt seen, heard, valued, and loved, which gave him the confidence to be able to launch into adulthood, because he felt all of those things, right, through that experience that gave him the confidence to do these other things in life. And this is a kiddo that was raised by a grandparent. Mom was incarcerated. Dad was murdered. I mean, right? So a lot of hard things. And so we can take it down all to the small things, and we can take it down into the individual, but then, the scaling, because, 1 + 1 isn't always 2. 1 + 1 can mean,
Yes.
a multiplier. So
Yes.
I feel that to my core with what you said.
Thank you. Thank you.
Didn't mean
And just
final thought, Jason.
not at all. Yeah. And just, so that James kind of knows what you said too, and to pass it to Jason. I love the amplification that you just put on like the small things, but the ripple effects that can amplify it beyond. So Jason, what you got?
Just an appreciation for Jody bringing it down to human scale. We talk about branding and brand relationships with consumers, and nonprofit relationships with communities, and organizational relationships with employees, but it just comes down to human scale. And so, Jody, thanks for bringing us there through that story. I think the same, that my life is somewhat odd right now, because half the time is spent on the ranch, like driving fence posts, and half the time is spent like in boardrooms having conversations about enterprise dynamics. And but the question that comes to me a lot is like, how do we bring these good intentions, what the research and the science tells us is necessary to have a thriving, engaged, productive, meaning-based group of people doing work together, and to bring it down to the simplicity of it, that we crave coherence, we crave an individual or a set of people who can help us understand how where we are now connects to where we've been and leads to where we're going. And when we think about where we're going, we want agency. We want to have some participation in deciding the direction of travel and being part of the decision making that leads to the future. And we want that resonance. And James, that's the word that I pick out of what you were talking about. You were speaking of it literally with audible resonance in nature, but it's the same kind of resonance you found in Kerri, where you could match each other in experience. It's the same kind of resonance you find at the Y when you find your peeps. That's Jody's term that I'm pulling away from this. Is there any better definition of belonging than just find your peeps? Like, that's wonderful, Jody. But it's that resonance, that sense of connectivity and social cohesion. All work journeys, all shared social journeys are a blending of individual narratives, and they come together and they make some larger story. And how we do that together, I think of the teams right now in my mind that are going through massive disruptive transformation in huge fintech or logistics, and all they're wanting are the things that we just talked about. They want coherence, they want agency, they want resonance, they want companionship. And these things are possible to be built. They can be built despite the pressures and the fragmentation and the atomization of our world right now. We can do this. Nature teaches us how, yes, but a lot of your work, James, and the work of people like you are teaching us too.
I love that. And, I think that's why we're having these conversations, is to explore it together, to sort of see what's sort of bubbling up, because it's not either or. They absolutely have to get down to the very basic human things, because at the end of the day, I always say to people, if you're not really sure how to make this happen, bring it down to like two people having a conversation, and then work out from there. What would it take to do this one-on-one? Then figure out the scale, the strategy, the infrastructure, the process. And some people are like, you can't scale one-on-one in human interaction. I'm like, we do it all the time. We live in human interaction with lots of other people all the time. So I think that's a bit of a myth, that we can't figure out how to do this in something beyond small groups, ones and twos, because the world is big and vast, nature is big and vast, the human species is big and vast, and we do these things. I think the highlights that I want to leave with people are what you all said: the little things matter. So this conversation should remind people of what those little things are and how they make people feel, so that when you're debating the shortcut, you don't take the shortcut. You say, I'm going to do the little thing that matters because I know it is adding up to creating a better experience for people. That there are also systems and structures you can and should build that are optimized for the conditions that lead more people to find their peeps, that lead more people to find that resonance and that relevance somewhat naturally, somewhat exploit. It's both natural and not, because you're creating conditions for it. But the conditions are what people need, and they don't have to show up the way we show up. Somebody in the chat said, I'll be real quick on this. They said, can we talk about not having to speak? Absolutely. Because that's what we mean. Like, it doesn't have to be chatty, gregarious, everybody's on 10, super extroverted. Belonging is also the place to be at peace with yourself and show up the way you want to show up so that you can do the thing that you're there to do. I'll leave it with this. There was a great experience that we had working, Jody, with you on part of the early phases of the transformation that was at play. And we were trying to figure out, like, what is it that would, for lack of a better term, how would we get more people, how can we help more people get engaged in the process? And we started looking at the stories, and we started looking at SEEQ, sitting in your office. I remember it clear as day. And we both first had the insight before the story said anything about, like, what gets in the way of people moving forward. And the answer was anxiety, hesitation, reservation, a lack of clarity, like human conditions, which Jason has talked about. And then we went and said, well, what are the places and times where people are experiencing anxiety? And we saw it, and we were like, oh, it's these times when they don't feel all the things that Jason talked about, all those moments. They don't feel those things happening as a condition of doing something maybe hard or different or new. But then we said, but some people, maybe they've moved past that. Maybe they moved to, like, I did it once, I did the hard thing once, I felt safe doing it, and now I kind of anticipate something good might come out of this if I keep at it. So they moved from anxiety to anticipation. And then the last part, which was like mind-blowing, is you could see in the data what it looked like when they achieved the hard thing that they didn't think they could do. And that was, in fact, an emotional employee journey of going from anxiety to anticipation to achievement. And you could see it in people's stories. And I think that happened and happens when you create places where people can navigate that journey. If they can't navigate it, they can't navigate it. And so I'm just really, really grateful for each of you for what you do in the world, for what you do with your own teams, in your own communities, for what you do in the broader landscape of this type of leadership. It's been a privilege and a treat and an inspiration to be with you. And I'm going to go back and replay this as soon as possible so I can listen to Jody, because if you knew Jody and me, you would understand how hard this is for us to be in a conversation that we're having through Jason and Kerri. It's very, very
They're pretty good. You can tell
we're
him
connected.
you guys are really good.
Yeah.
So we were able to do it because of the deep connection and
This
trust.
is a real test of your sense of belonging with Jody, actually.
That's what I was gonna say.
You two have made it through. You really do belong to each other.
Yes, we do. And I think that is true of this group now. And I hope you guys find things to do together, because there's so much opportunity space out here to show and demonstrate how to lead in this way. We're going to drop lots of links in the chat. We're going to drop these three leaders' profiles in the chat. We'll drop their organizations, what they're working on in the chat. The newsletter that I talked about a while ago has that information in there as well. And please spend time with them, reach out to them, talk to them, and see how your experience and their experience might connect to build something better. Thank you all so much for being part of this today. We really appreciate you.
Thanks, James, Jody, Kerri.
Thank you.